Hi, everyone. This is Maria Kim, the Program Director for Elementary and Secondary Teaching. Welcome to class. This is a recorded lecture. This is for my initial student teaching seminar class and my intermediate student teaching seminar class. If you were in initial student teaching seminar, you probably already have gone through this lecture before, but I wanted to have a review session just to make sure that you are preparing yourself for the final student teaching seminar class and that you have all your documentation in place in time for me to get you a placement so you can graduate at your expected time. So the workshop today is how to become a credentialed teacher. There are 7 major steps to becoming a credentialed teacher. The first step is to get your bachelor's degree. The second step is to enroll and complete courses in a teacher education program or a TEP. The third step is to get 600 hours of observations and student teaching. The fourth step is to pass the Cal TPAs. There are 2 cycles, cycle 1 and cycle 2. The fifth step is to have the TEP or the teacher education program here at La Sierra recommending you to the state, the CTC, or the Commission on Teacher Credentialing, for a preliminary credential. The sixth step is for you, the teacher candidate, to apply to the Commission on Teacher Credentialing, or the CTC, to complete that process. Then you will go find a job, get hired, and you'll start an induction program to get your final cleared credential, which is your final credential. And that process usually takes about 2 to 5 years. Here at La Sierra, there are, you can do basically steps 1, 2, 3, and 4 all at the same time. So you can get your bachelor's degree while you're taking credential courses and doing your 600 hours. You can pass your Cal TPAs and everything. And so here at La Sierra, we have programs for you to be able to do the first 4 steps all together at the same time. If you are here for your graduate degree or your post-bac credential, you already should have number 1 finished your bachelor's degree, and then you can enroll in the program, do your hours, and pass the Cal TPAs all at the same time. The question is, if you are an undergraduate student, is what should you major in? So technically, you can major in anything you want, but you might need to take the CSETs, which stands for California Subject Examination for Teachers, if your major does not match the content you want to teach. For example, let's say you have a bachelor's degree in business, but you really want to teach English. That's okay. You have your bachelor's degree in business, so all you need to do is take the CSETs, or the California Subject Examination for Teachers, for English, and that can give you your content subject matter competencies fulfilled. So that's just saying that you know the content that you want to teach. Let's say you majored in history, but you really decided that you want to be an elementary teacher. Well, that bachelor's degree is great, but then you should take the CSETs for liberal studies, or your multiple subject credential. So the CSETs for your multiple subject credential. Now, if you are currently in your undergraduate program, there are specific degrees you're going to want to major in. So you don't have to take the CSETs if you don't have to. So for elementary teachers, we call this the multiple subject credential because you're teaching multiple subjects. You're teaching math, English, history, science, maybe PE, art, music, maybe you're doing all of that. So you need to know a little bit of everything. And so the degrees, a bachelor's degree in liberal studies, liberal arts, or elementary education will fulfill your subject matter competencies. So you will not need to take the CSETs if you want your multiple subject credential. If you want a single subject credential, which means you want to specialize in a specific content area, and generally this is for those who are teaching middle school and high school, then you're going to want to make sure that you have on your transcript, your bachelor's degree will have the name of your bachelor's degree will be matched with the area that you want to teach in, the content area that you want to teach in. So if you want to teach art, you want to make sure you have a bachelor's of fine arts, BFA, and whatever concentration you had. If you want to teach business, then you want to make sure that your business degree, that your bachelor's degree says business. Same goes for English, mathematics, music. Social science is really important for history teachers. For currently, up to what I am aware of, if you want to teach history, you must major in social science. Social studies does not count, and history does not count. So please make sure it's social science. An engineering degree will allow you to teach middle school level science, and biology, chemistry, and physics will help let you teach up to the secondary high school level. And if you want to teach a world language, make sure your bachelor's degree is in the language that you want to teach in. Here at La Sierra, these are the list of bachelor's degrees that you can major in here and bypass those CSETs, those tests that you would have to take for that. The TEP, which is the Teacher Education Program courses, are specific courses that will help you prepare to become a strong first-year teacher. So here's a list of the courses that you need in order to get your credential, your preliminary credential. So we have our foundational courses, and right here, our initial student teaching seminar, Intro to Teaching, our digital literacies, culture, society, and ethics, and we have psychological and health perspectives of learners. If you have not taken an American government class or the Constitution exam, this is the class that you should take. Alternatively, we also have a paper and pencil Constitution exam you can take. We are working on getting that into an online module for you. And that through the university is free, but if you want to take the online version of it, we currently don't have one, but you can sign up for that for a small fee through various companies. The one I recommend is usconstitutionexam.com through the University of Notre Dame. And so I believe you have 3 tries to pass that exam through usconstitutionexam.com. If you're looking for your SDA teaching certificate, here are some additional courses that you will need to take to get your basic teaching certificate through the SDA system. There's teaching methods courses, our intermediate student teaching seminar, which is basically units that cover you for all the clinical practice hours you'll need to be doing. And then we have assessment-driven instruction, comprehensive classroom management, and special education and inclusion. After you've taken those courses, or maybe even simultaneously, we have some courses that elementary teachers specifically need to take, and we have classes that specifically secondary teachers need to take. If you are trying to get your California state teaching credential, you will need to additionally register and enroll and pass the state teaching credential assessment courses. These are new courses that we have implemented in place of another course that we took out. And these courses are supposed to help you and support you in passing the Cal TPAs, which stands for the California Teaching Performance Assessment. And so these classes will will help pace you and provide all the background material that you need to succeed on your Cal TPAs. Passing this class does not guarantee that you pass the Cal TPAs, but we are working to structure it so that the chances of you passing that Cal TPA is very high compared to if you didn't have this kind of support. Finally, you have your final student teaching courses. There are 7 units taken over 2 quarters. Depending on your financial aid situation, we can work with you on how many units you want to take over the 2 quarters. If you want to register for all of them in 1 quarter or split them up into 2 quarters. And we work with you individually to make sure that we get the best case scenario for your financial aid needs. All right, our third step in getting your teaching credential is the 600 hours of student teaching. While you are taking all of your TEP courses, those classes that were listed previously, you will be accruing hours of observations, of active observations and student interactions, and your final student teaching. So the first step of your clinical practice hours is observations. And you can imagine that we set you up with a classroom and a mentor teacher. You are in that space and you are just kind of like a fly on the wall, observing how the teacher is running their classroom, how she or he is managing the students, how they give instruction, how they transition into various different stations or different parts of their day and their curriculum. So just observing, you're really not interacting with students at all. The second phase of student teaching is your active observations and student interactions. And this is where you might be taking attendance, you might be grading papers, you might be helping put up bulletin boards, you might be running a station or a small group, doing a reading station or a math tutoring station for your mentor teacher. You may even be occasionally teaching a whole class, doing whole class instruction during this time. And then finally, you get into your final student teaching. This final step usually occurs after you've taken all of your courses, and you will be doing 2 quarters of full-time final student teaching. You'll be in the classroom from approximately 7:30 or 8 o'clock, depending on when the school day begins, till the end of school around 3 o'clock. You'll be there with the mentor teacher, basically just breathing in the methods and the strategies that your mentor teacher uses to control the classroom and to instruct the classroom. During your final student teaching phase, you will be finishing up your Cal TPA cycles, and you will be doing a lot more extensive whole class instruction. Approximately the last 4 weeks or towards the end of your final student teaching experience, you should have about 4 weeks pretty straight, pretty continuous, where you are the classroom teacher, basically. And your mentor teacher is not in the classroom. She might be running errands, doing something outside of the classroom. She might be in your classroom, but she's not generally expected to assist you in any way, in any capacity. This is your time to practice feeling like the teacher in charge. And so the 600 hours of student teaching over the course of your time in the credential program should be fairly easy to accrue if you follow the instructions for the hours that you need per quarter. We actually expect you to be getting closer to 700 hours because we want you to have a very robust experience in your student teaching. During your 600 student teaching hours, this is how we want to structure it for you. As a freshman or the first quarter of your post-bac or graduate program, we are wanting you to get 30 hours of observation. And so if you do not get placed in time, we work with that. So it's like, oh, we were trying to get you a placement. Sometimes the districts don't get back to us in time. But we are going to try to aim for 30 hours of observation. So for a freshman coming into La Sierra University, you have a full year to do 30 hours of observation, which is very, very easy to do and accomplish. Also, during this time, we want you to get your TB test results, your certificate of clearance. These 2 items you must have before you enter the classroom. The mandated reporter is something that you can do early on, or you can do it your second quarter or your second year. But the first 2 bullets, the TB test results and the certificate of clearance, are 2 very big requirements that we must have before you can begin your observation hours. During your sophomore year or your second quarter of our graduate degree program, we want to make sure that you have your American government or Constitution exam requirement fulfilled, and you do 90 hours of active clinical practice. So for a sophomore, you can expect to do about 3 hours per week throughout the entire school year, about 3 hours per week. Whereas if you're in the graduate program, you only have 1 quarter to do 90 hours of active clinical practice. And so we're expecting you to do at least 9 hours of observations per week. We do not want you to procrastinate and try to get all of it done in the last 4 weeks. That's very unprofessional. We want 9 hours per week through that second quarter. For juniors, we want you to do your 90 hours again. Again, similar with the third quarter post-bac graduate students to get those 90 hours in that third quarter. You'll also be working on making sure that you complete your subject matter competencies, which with the CSETs, or if you already have a bachelor's degree in the content area you want to teach, then that's fine. But we want to make sure that your CSETs are finished by the end of third quarter, because that's the biggest hang up for many of our students for student teaching, that they cannot get a placement until they have their subject matter competencies fulfilled. During your senior year or your fourth quarter of the post-bac degree, making sure everything is finished. Your subject matter competencies or your CSETs, your adult and infant CPR and first aid, begin working on your Cal TPA, your first cycle, and then you have your 90 hours of your student teaching. Or you might begin even your final placement, which would be really exciting to get done by your fourth quarter in our program or your senior year. This is the same information put into a table. Your freshmen, the first row is what we expect freshmen in first quarter post-bac students to have, is your negative TB test, certificate clearance, and your mandated reported training. Sophomores are to have their government exam finished. Juniors or your third quarter post-bac graduate students should begin working on their subject matter or finishing it up. Seniors and fourth quarter post-bac students have your CPR first aid renewed, as well as your subject matter competencies completely finished, so we can make sure you have your final student teaching placement set up in time. Your Cal TPA stands for California Teaching Performance Assessments. Cycle 1 and Cycle 2 tests, and it measures your aptitude for teaching. There'll be a series of questions that you need to respond to in a very robust and academic manner. And this is a way for us to ensure, and for the state to ensure, that you indeed know the strategies and the ways in which you can be a strong first-year teacher. The Cal TPA highlights things that are really big and important in that process. Is one, getting to know your students. There's pages and pages for you to write out how you get to know your students. And you have 3 focus students. You have an English learner, you have a student with special needs, and you have a student who has experienced trauma. And so you write extensively about these 3 focus students in your classroom, what their hobbies are, their cultural background, the experiences they have, and the challenges they might face in the classroom. And you write very robustly, very academically. And the second highlight is for you to lesson plan. So you write out your lesson plan, the activities that you want to do to instruct your students, what standards you will be using. And then you'll also highlight your accommodations for the focus students that you had in that first section of getting to know your students. What accommodations are you doing and intentionally putting in place for your EL students, your special needs students, and your students of trauma? And then you have your assessment piece where you, after you've instructed your students, what assessments will you be learning, will you be giving out to your students to assess what they learned? Have they met the objectives? Do they fulfill the goals that you have set out for them in that lesson plan? The fourth highlight is your classroom environment and culture. This is often done through recording, but also through your writing of how are you intentionally making sure that your classroom is a safe space for students to interact with each other and with you and with their physical environment. The last piece is the recording of your teaching, your reflection, and your analysis. The recording is a really big deal. It's a really big process. You have to ensure that you have video consent forms for all of your students, and that if your students did not return those consent forms, that those students are not in the frame of your recording, and that their voices are not coming out in that recording. So here's a little snapshot of a small, tiny piece of Cal TPA. So I want to read a few of these questions, and I want you to imagine how different and how similar are these questions. So the first question says, what essential questions will you ask to determine if students are not yet meeting, or exceeding the learning goals of the lesson? So that's pretty simple. You can write 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 questions that you want to ask the students, want to ask yourself, to determine if the students are meeting, not meeting, or exceeding the learning goals of the lesson. Okay, what will students do to demonstrate achievement of content during the lesson? Okay, so you might say they what kinds of activities, actually I'm not allowed to give you examples, but what kinds of activities are students doing, right? You list those kinds of things. How will you know that content specific goals are being met? Well, that sort of sounds similar to what you could write for the previous question of what will students do to demonstrate achievement of content during the lesson. And so you have to understand that you cannot copy and paste a section of what you wrote in the previous question. They need to be brand new answers. Now, the content of it could be the same, but you cannot copy and paste it. It needs to be paraphrased, rehashed out. And so the CalTPA has lots of questions and sections like this, where technically your response to one question could fulfill like 95% of another question. But if you copy and paste, you will fail. So you must paraphrase and re-paraphrase and re-paraphrase sometimes. I felt like for some of my questions, I had to respond 4 different ways to the same type of questions. So it's a little bit tedious. I find that I think most of our students probably who don't pass not because the CalTP was hard, but because it was very tedious and you had to rehash and show with intentionality how you did these things, but rephrase it in a different way, question after question. The last question is, how will you know that ELD goals are being met? Your English language development goals are being met. So even if you're teaching a math class, you want to make sure that you have a bit of literacy and English language development goals that you are still touching on in your math class. So our CalTPA plan right now is that undergraduate freshmen through juniors, we have a special Blackboard called our CalTPA Blackboard that we provide lots of resources to you, and we want you to make sure that you have those resources. And as you do your class work, you will actually find folders and folders in there that can help you with your other classes as well. Then if you're a senior or post-bac credential and MAT students, you're going to get onto that same CalTPA Blackboard. And during your last or second to last placement for student teaching, you will be very much immersed in that CalTPA Blackboard. And you're going to be completing those cycles in your classroom. Your mentor teacher will be informed of what is expected of you, in order to be able to complete those cycles in your student teaching experience. All right, so the final steps to becoming a teacher. So after you're done with all of your courses, you've done over 600 hours of student teaching, you've passed your CalTPAs, then what will happen is the university, the TEP, is going to recommend you to the state for your preliminary credential. Woohoo! Yes, to the Commission on Teacher Credentialing. And then after we recommend you to the state, you will go into the website and you will apply to the state to complete your process and get your preliminary credential. Your preliminary credential will be issued, and then you can apply for jobs on edjoin.org or other websites, but generally speaking, edjoin.org has the most extensive job opening list. So you get hired, and then once you get hired, I recommend you start an induction program right away to get your clear credential, which is your final credential. The induction program is kind of like an extension of student teaching where you're given a mentor, you meet with that mentor regularly, and they help you throughout your first few years of teaching to make sure that you achieve the maximum amount of growth you can in your first few years of your teaching. in your professional experience. This is a different way of looking at the same information. Is you have your student teaching, you might be an intern, you might get a permit. So you could, during your student teaching, you could also get paid as a classroom teacher, which you can talk to me about if you're very interested in something like that. And then after you do your student teaching successfully, you get your preliminary credential, which is valid for 5 years. During those 5 years, you're going to complete a commission approved induction program, and then you'll get your clear credential. And so your clear credential means that all education and program requirements are met, and it must be renewed online every few years. I think mine is going to be 2026. I think I need to renew my clear credential. All right, so that was a lot of information. I want to thank you for spending the time listening to all these things. If you have specific questions, please, please, please put them in the discussion question in Blackboard, and I will respond to those questions and I can get back to you. But I would love for you to give me a couple questions so that when we meet in synchronously, not in person, online synchronously, that I'll be able to answer those questions starting on August 19, I believe. So everybody have a great week, and let me know if you have any questions. If you already have a placement, please be communicating with your mentor teacher so that you can hit the ground running. I would love for you to see what the first day of school looks like. That would be just phenomenal. Those first few weeks of school are really important. So make sure you communicate with your mentor teacher. I am working on getting placements for all of you who don't have one yet. So please check your email and stay in the loop with that. Thank you very much.